All right. Today I just want to do a quick thing. I sent out a thing at the last minute, but it'll be on YouTube. Um, it's about a lot of people are experiencing this phenomenon where they feel out of touch, not quite focused, not quite like their old selves, out of sorts, all these terms that we've used, right? And so, like you just don't feel like your old self. You have no vig, no vim, no motivation, no drive. Things that used to uh, excite you don't excite you anymore. All of that kind of stuff, right? So what's going on, right? I've been thinking about this, and some of you know I'm doing a new NLP, Street Smart NLP Basic, and I brought in a lot of stuff from, in the what's the word I want? Like from how to truly influence people at a deep level. Things like what the CIA, DIA, FBI might do, right? And because they're good at identifying things and getting people to influence people in certain directions. So this this thing a lot of us are going through where you feel out of sorts, out of context, you can't do that. You lose track of days, right? And of course, we've defaulted to, and I did it, and then I started doing some other things. Um, and realizing no, it's not just that. When COVID hit and it threw everybody's routine off, right? A lot of your markers for how you did your life um, were gone. TV shows, sporting events, things like that. Also, too, when they shut everything down, a lot of people couldn't go to work. They couldn't like go to the restaurant if that was their big out, go to the movies if that's what they did, right? TV shows shut down, TV and broadcast stuff shut down, right? And so we lost our connection, right? And if you couldn't go to work, you couldn't go to the restaurants or the theater, movies, bars, whatever, you lost that. And it leads to what psychologists and psychiatrists would call cognitive drift, right? Where you're not, your brain's kind of drifting here and there, Said earlier in a class I did, I talked about not Neville Goddard, Napoleon Hill's last book was Conversations with the Devil. And what he talked about is the worst thing that can happen to people is they drift. They don't, they drift from this goal to that goal. They're just constantly drifting, right? And it's a great book. I haven't read it for a while. Probably, I know it's on my Audible. Maybe I'll listen to it again. But it can lead to feelings of numbness, apathy, um, things like that. So you feel off focus, not quite you. You have the inability to recall conversations, moments, or even feelings from the recent past, right? And it's just based on what's going on in the real world, right? And then you get emotionally numb, right? And the reason is it goes back to our brains were not intended to get as much information as it's getting now. We get more information in a very short period of time than our grandparents got in a lifetime, right? And it's also this emotional roller coaster that like social media is notorious at, right? And it's been engineered that way, but it leads to reactive. You swing between just being totally apathetic to just being pissed off, agitated, without ever knowing like what specifically is it, right? And really, what this leads to is a loss of self and identity, right? And you lose things that used to bring you passion, whatever it was, uh, playing golf, riding your bike, uh, taking acting classes live to get the feedback from other people. And then because you're separated from people, you long to contact with people, but then it sets in the fear loop where I don't know if I want to reconnect with people. So it's this loop, right? And so you begin to lose your sense of self, right? Because basically our sense of self is really vulnerable, and it's always capable of being rewritten, especially if you get people on an emotional roller coaster and they have this cognitive drift, they don't know what's coming. A good example I always use that, when you see people reinvent their personality very quickly, uh, there's usually some strong emotional response that started it, right? I always think of the military, when people go in the military. First of all, they separate you from, your family, your friends, usually when you're here in the States. And I think from what I understand, most of the world, when you show up, you get one phone call your family, tell you you're here. That's it. Right? Until whatever, in the Army and the Marines, it's about 6 weeks in, right? And they say, if an emergency happens, we'll know and we'll get in touch with you. But, and it's, like one guy went through basics the last 20 years. He said, but you know what? If you're in the middle of Fallujah in a firefight, we're not going to bother you with, grandma's having surgery. It sounds cold, but this is just what it is. So they separate you so you latch on to the people around you, right? And they're constantly on this emotional roller coaster. You're going to be a great soldier, sailor, airman, marine, or you're a worthless piece of scum. And it's that ta, 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 right? And you're probably searching for a new sense of identity, right? And most people join the military are 18 to early 20s, and they're forming that, right? So they're vulnerable to it, right? And they also do, because you have no cell phones, you have no connection with the outside world. It actually does something that a lot of the psychologists and neurologists and psychiatrists are pointing out, that you need to be alone with your thoughts. That's how long-term memories are formed, but the minute you're stuck in a line, how many people grab their phone, start scrolling, right? Instead of thinking about the meaning of life, where do I want to go, what do I want to do, right? It's overstimulation. So the symptoms, again, you're not quite you don't know this, because you might have got, especially when COVID happened, it started it, where it separated you from a lot of your connections. And you began to lose connection with yourself, right? So really what it is kind of like social media, and a lot of the stuff we're doing is manufactured reality, right? Depending on which way you look at things, they know how to curate, like, oh, he likes right wing, this kind of stuff, and it becomes your identity, not just what you believe. This is your identity, and once that sets in, you will defend that identity. And you don't confuse me with the facts. Don't talk about this. It's like, this is the reality. And the algorithms, which your brain can't keep up with this much information coming at you so quickly, feeds what gives you a dopamine response. I still defer. I got to get the guy's name. He used to talk about the number one thing in advertising used to be sex, right? Diamond Diller, who's on the call, can tell you, they used to always have, if they were selling diamonds, always beautiful women, stunningly good-looking men, right? It's why, like, they always had the James Bond watch guy. James Bond is a good-looking human being, right? So it's this sex sales. It still does, but they found something. It's consumer capitalism to the nth degree. What gets people's attention even more is rage, anger. We don't want, I say that, I do talk to some people, no, I go, how many times you see something that pisses you off on your feed, you click on it, and then there's another video that comes up, you click on that one, and you're what is it, the term I use? You're down the rabbit hole, right? Or also called doom scrolling, right? But, they're still giving you advertisements, things are going on, right? And you look at the good social influencers, these social influencers, they're basically selling information, not change, right? But the first thing most of them do is get you something to be mad at, right? Whether it's the society, whether it's the other political party, whether it's the other religion, it's like, you're mad, right? And then they sell you their solution, their coaching, their this and their that, right? And it's kind of interesting, right? So these algorithms don't just reflect what your preferences and things you like. It begins to manufacture them, right? Because if you get that little bit of a dopamine boost from anger or rage or disgust, well, guess what? The next one's going to give more. And your brain likes that, right? Your brain likes that. It's as I forget his name, Gabor Mate. He talks about this as Alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, food is second to what this thing can do, right? Because it never ends and it's constantly coming at you, right? So scrolling, swiping, reacting, artificial inputs, you begin to shape your reality, and that shapes your identity, right? You forget who you are. I forget and that's like, where was the passion for whatever it was, playing golf, fishing, hunting? And first of it was taken away by society, which was, they're starting to show now that was the largest mass worldwide psychological warfare technique played on the public, right? And they created these false comparisons, right? And if you didn't agree with it, you were a bad person, right? Even if you had logical arguments, I mean, it's like the best one I heard, not to be political, but it had to do with the vax stuff that was going on. And this one person came out and they made a logical argument, and everybody's like, what do they know? Yeah, what does the guy that won the Nobel Prize in biology and virology know about any of this stuff, right? So they deny it. It's like, I just saw a good example of this. Then if somebody presents like something comes out, you see it in corporate a lot, right? Where some scandals are coming out or some things that doesn't look good in the public. What is the first thing a corporation will do, and the government too? They'll label you a discontent, a disgruntled former employee we had to fire, right? Which takes away like this, right? I just saw it just clicked up, and I go, this is interesting. The founder of Ben and Jerry's is quitting Ben and Jerry's. It has to do with he doesn't agree with where they're taking the company, right? Because they sold and all that. But the first thing the company starts saying, we've tried everything to appease people. Some people just can't be pleased. He's disgruntled. He's a disgruntled ex-owner, right? Discarding the fact him and his partner built the thing, right? But it's like, so it's this curation of a manufactured reality, right? And so basically it's like the things are quietly stealing your memory. And because memory is very fragile. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, I speak for a living. Very fragile, right? And what's interesting, for memories to form, if you understand how memories form, I don't claim to be a true neurologist, but I've studied it, or you just look it up, is things happen during the day, and as things are going on. If you have quiet, undisturbed time to process, your brain takes short-term memory and turns it into long-term memory, right? But if you're constantly being stimulated, your brain doesn't have the chance to switch over so it can develop long-term memory. So you really don't remember what you did yesterday, because as people say, I hit the ground running, right? And then I was doing this, then I was doing that, and then I was doing this, then I was doing that, right? And you basically keep going. In the evening, when we used to unwind a little bit, right? Maybe watching television, or originally sitting around the campfire, is gone, and people are sitting there, and I've been guilty of it. I will admit that. Like, TV's on, my wife and I were watching something, commercial comes on, I start, so now she yelled at me. So when I'm in there, excuse me, they see, I just did it. I looked and I go, ooh, shit, teach what you need to learn. And it's like, leave the, I don't work for a crisis mental health type center. If I don't get back to you right away, who cares? Even the thing I'm doing clinically in this other thing, it's like, even the owner says, every once in a while we get, this is an emergency. And it was another person said, if it was that important to the client, they should have done this yesterday. If today's the final day, why did you wait till today? And so, but we're so used to that, right? And again, everything should be at your fingertips. It's like, started with the hustle culture. We can thank our dear friend Tony Robbins for this. It's like hustle, hustle, hustle. You can't outwork everybody. Yeah, you may become successful, but you're the most successful person in the graveyard at the age of 45, right? And we just saw it again less recently where Elon Musk was saying, well, if you're really motivated and you want to succeed, you got to be willing to work 80 to 100 hours a week. And people, yeah, that's true. And then, like, his last partner said he's never seen the guy in the office over 6 hours in a month, let alone. Not that he's not good at what he does, but it's like, well, no, I need you, How do you get rich? Hard work. Oh, so you work hard. No, I get rich off your hard work for me. Okay. So anyway, but we lose ourself. And again, we're part of a tribe, a group, of a system, whatever it happens to be. And your biggest fear is being thrown out, and it's not normal to push back on that. I used to go to a couple places, and I quit going to them, and people go, oh, don't you miss it? I go, why the hell would I miss it? If I wanted to go, I'd go, Well, but don't you see, like, whatever the post, and I go, no, first thing I did is block them from my feeds. Right. And it's like, and I just took, that was nothing, not that I have insight or depth or anything. I just like, in the addiction world, if you could block the feeds for alcohol commercials, you're probably going to be better off if you were a drinker, because it's not that constant stimulation. Right. But again, the other people of the tribe will generally, if you look at it more like a cult, they're a little bit sad you left, but then the minute you leave, you're a non-entity. You're not part of the subculture, right? Whatever it happens to be. Could be religious, could be educational, could be whatever it is, right? But we long for that connection, and we've lost that connection. And we've quit connecting with human beings, and I'd say this really speeded up with COVID, when it was just physically removed from most of us for quite a while, from a few months here in Florida to California, New York. It went on for over a year. Then of course, when things open up, it's kind of like, why don't people want to go to restaurants? Why don't people want to go to the movies anymore? When they trained us for years, I remember if you were in a grocery store back when that was going on and somebody sneezed, you hope nobody was carrying a weapon at that point, because they may just open fire on you, So we lose this, it's cognitive drift, right? So the best thing you can do, and I'm going to talk about something real quick. I want to give an example. I taught this earlier, and it comes from a CIA manual that was what is it called? Released to the public in, I think, 2014. I do have a PDF if anybody wants it, but it's basically a different way to influence people, right? And here in the NLP world, real quick, we have the HOT model, how you go from an experience, first level of thought, to disassociation is your second level of thought, where you're thinking about it. So when you're angry, when you're really angry, it's all you can do. But if you can pull back and think about, why am I angry? That's the next level. You can begin to make some changes. And another level of thought, the highest level for this model, is double disassociation. You pull back and go, am I angry? Or, am I upset about something else, right? So, make sure you're muted if you don't mind, because thank you. Good. But here's a different model, right? Is a system of influence, right? At the highest level, this is your mind, right? At the highest level is your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that thinks, right? At the deepest level is your brainstem, your survival mode, right? And so I always use the analogy of, excuse me, I click on that. Okay, great. Weird model, but this your brain. I know this is not how you make a fist. This part of your brain would be your brainstem and your amygdala, fight, flight, the part of you that's keeping you alive, looking for food, looking for shelter, looking for mate, doing this, right? And then as your brain developed, your cerebellum and your prefrontal cortex kind of folds over, right? But this part of your brain is always operating, When we talk about your reticular activating system, and how, if you always wanted a certain type of new car, and you make a decision, and suddenly your prefrontal cortex will notice it everywhere. You'll see a BMW or a Corvette, whatever it is you like, right? Boom, right? Because you reprogram this part of your mind to find it for you, right? And this part of your mind, your deep brain, especially your brainstem, is where real change happens, right? But up here at the top, we have our prefrontal cortex, executive function, as psychology would say, higher levels of thought. It's kind of a heretical for me to say the fact that unfortunately most therapy stays up here, because, to become a psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker, mental health counselor, you're a smart person and you want to be smart. So you're going to assume all I have to do is give the people the right facts and things will change. But we all know that's not how people really change, right? So that's the highest level, right? But we get stuck up here. The next level down is your cerebral cortex. It's where your subconscious starts and is, right? You're always going back and forth, but it's your visual cortex. You can't shut it off. So if something moves, you'll be startled. It's part of that lights up your fight or flight. It's also the first level of impulse control, right? You can have all the knowledge in the world about what your bad habits are, but if you don't get the impulse control, insight will not make the change. Now what gets fun when you move into the next level is true subconscious, is your reticular activating system, your limbic system, your cerebellum. It's where emotional regulation happens. Okay? If you can control your emotional response, you're much more likely to be in control of the situation. And when it happens, it's like, I did have a video because I do, like I said, I'm working on my doom scrolling. But one, it was a person had an interaction with a law enforcement officer. And usually it gets weird, those kind of videos. But this one, the guy never lost his cool. Right? And usually, in this case, I would hypothesize or hallucinate that the police officer, the law enforcement officer, was so used to getting this person all pissed off that they would do something stupid. Bump into them, push them away, then we see what would happen. This guy was just so calm, right? And what ended up happening, it flipped back on the other person. They got all upset, right? Anyway, make a long story short, the guy won a $3 million lawsuit against the county because, when you saw the video, the guy's body cam and the guy was smart enough to video it. It's like there was no justification to do what you did, But anyway, he got if you lose your emotional regulation, you'll drop down to your deepest mind. This is where true change happens, right? It's your brainstem, right? It's fight, flight, freeze, food, water, sex, things like that. This part of your brain's always, operating, and it's been trained over the years to find things, your reticular activating system, that is threatening to you as a human being. It's why, we used to say, oh, everyone's born tabula rasa, a blank slate. Well, not really. It depends on a lot of different factors. But one, they do know certain things have a tendency to be like in your DNA. Fear of spiders, fear of snakes. A lot of times, fear of heights. We're not monkeys anymore. We're not good up in the heights, right? And then, so for thousands of generations, spiders, snakes, all this stuff could kill you. So you became very wary of it, and it got passed down. Doesn't have to make sense. It's just what it is, right? And so, and this part of your brain will always default to authority figures. Always default to authority figures, right? Because our brains hasn't changed in 200,000 years. And for most of that millennia, your brain was trained to default to the tribal leader, the shaman, warlord. If it was a family system, to the dad or the mom, whoever was in charge, you defaulted to authority figures, right? And it's very powerful. And if you can get people down here in emotional response and get them to default to or defer to authority, they're much more likely to just go along with what you say. Go back to my little video with that cop. It was pretty good because the cop kept yelling at him, and he goes, "Actually, under these situations, officer, you have no authority over me." And it was very calm, and you could just see that the person he was talking to wasn't used to that, right? So anyway, and how powerful is this? I talked about it this morning in the other class, but I'll review it. It's called the Milgram experiment, right? If you're familiar with the Milgram experiment, because it started in the 50s, and the first study was done in 62 by Dr. Milgram. I think it was Yale. If I'm wrong, correct me. I don't care. And from what I understand, the thing that got him really wondering is how, after World War II, after the Nuremberg trials, Yale, okay. But after the Nuremberg trials, big question was, how could these intelligent, articulate professionals, lawyers, doctors, teachers, do inhumane things, right? Then and of course their default was, I was just following orders, right? And follow me on how the study went, because once you understand it, you go, oh, that's how it happened. Because this cognitive drift, things are going on. I'm not saying it's being manufactured to control the population, but there's some stuff going on. What they did at Yale, they put out for volunteers, as they always do, and they were going to pay them whatever it was, a few bucks, a couple lunch vouchers. Doesn't take much to bribe college kids, right? And so people would show up and they'd say, okay, here's the study is, we're studying learning. We're studying learning, which is very important. And so we're going to pair up, and one of you will draw straws. One of you will be the testor, and the other will be the student. Fine. And they, okay. So then, of course, but it was a setup. The tester was always the person that was part of the study, and then the volunteer, or vice versa, the person that became the student went into the other room. They were the ones being tested. The tester was what, we're testing, like, how far will the tester take this? And so what it was is, you're going to ask these questions, and when the person answers, if they're wrong, you're going to shock them. That's all it was. Pretty simple, right? And okay, so they agreed. Now the person that was going in the other room, once they went in the other room, you couldn't see him, but you could hear him. And so the other part of the study was, okay, each time they get the wrong answer, you're going to shock them, and they're going to turn the dial up to increase the voltage, right? And on the little dial, if you went all the way to the end, it had like XXX, danger, fatal dose, or whatever, right? And so they assumed, well, everybody will stop when it gets to be, just not that high. Well, what happened was they'd start testing, and the tester could hear the person screaming. Started low, ow, ugh, and it would escalate, because the person on the side was part of the study, and what I understand, from the acting group, right? So, it got all the way up to where it was super high, almost fatal, and they're still shocking them, and the person starts screaming, stop it, I don't want to do this anymore. Let me out. Let me out. Well, the person doing the testing, college kids at a major university, you don't get in there if you're not, if you don't have some functioning, cortex going on. They'd hear that, and then they would usually turn to the authority figure, the person that set it up, who had a white lab coat. They're holding a clipboard like you'd see in a doctor's office, things like that. And in one of the studies, they redid it, there's also a guy there with like in a suit, which is kind of a power thing. And they would look, and the person would go, because they go, should I stop? And they go, it's important to finish the study. All of them took the person to fatal, almost all of them took the person to fatal dose. The person would scream, then go silent. Right? And, and so that kind of went against what they thought would happen, but they duplicated it, kept happening over and over again. Right? And you could have some things down here, they were just deferring to authority, right? and they wanted to stay as part of the tribe, maybe to get the money to do whatever it was, right? And they couldn't, they, and in follow-up studies, they kind of found out that the person doing the shocking kind of dehumanized the other people, right? Like when you look at, I was just watching a movie the other night, an old movie, I like old movies. It was a World War II movie, right? And the way the Japanese were portrayed, right? Well, if you go back, the movie was made in the 40s, right? They didn't want you to think, you know what? That Japanese soldier's just like you. He's probably got a wife, kids. He's just doing what he has to do. Probably doesn't want to be there, for God's sakes. But, the emperor called, just like most of the US guys got drafted, or if they joined, it's like, yeah. So they would dehumanize, right? But the interesting thing, I say, with this study is only a small percentage would even ask how the other person was doing. Mainly to get away from the bad feelings, collect their money and go. And again, this study was 62, if I remember right. I know it was duplicated in 2002. I forget where, and it's been duplicated in a couple other places, right? And it has to do with how we defer to authority. So when you're experiencing this cognitive drift, things like that, these algorithms, these social influencers always have the authority, right? And I know what I'm saying next is rather political, but I don't care. It's like the way that suddenly, what happened was horrible, I condemn it. But they turned the guy that was assassinated, the social influencer, acting like he's the ultimate authority on Christianity and helping people, live a good life. And, if you pull back, once you see the fog, you go, and then the way people defend it, right? When I saw one, somebody showed a video of the guy talking. Well, that's not what he meant. Guy's making $20 million a year as a social influencer, but he knew how to piss you off. And the people that helped him design the system said, yeah, you want people to agree with you, but you really want people mad at you. Right? You really want people mad at you, because that'll keep you engaged. There's a guy here in the States, Steven something Smith. He's a sportscaster, right? And all he does is piss people off, by saying like Michael Jordan isn't the best basketball player. And da, 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 da. Well, now he's getting a different talk show to talk about politics. And I'm like, first of all, why is he an expert in that? And then I heard one of the athletes that was talking to him goes, "You've never played a game in your life. What do I care what you think? You never coached a team. You never played a team. You've never managed a team." But I'm like, brilliant, because I think they picked him up because he really pisses you off. And that'll keep you engaged. Then you drift off from him. You get sucked into the algorithm of fighting, right? So anyway, so how do you, I guess, and there's a guy, his name is Chase Hughes, talks a lot about it. I think he was in naval intelligence for a long time. There's some steps. First of all, don't fight it, see it. It's like first become aware that you have the addiction. And if you get the compulsion, see it. Right? Then you can make choices, but first you have to see it. Right? If you don't, you're in it before you can do anything. And then here's the hard part for us as humans is drop the mask, right? We have social pressure to conform. So be who you really are, at least to yourself. Right? Because we're so afraid we're going to get thrown from the group. So if you're in a group that would throw you out, just because of what you believe, you might want to look at that. I hate to quote the guy, but I love his quote. Woody Allen said, "I'd never join a group that would allow a guy like me to be a member. But I'm more scared I'd never be a group that if you disagree with one aspect, you got to leave the group." And it's politically incorrect to say, but look at the church. You believe one thing I don't, you can't take communion. So it's kind of interesting, right? And then you recover buried aspects of yourself. The parts of you, the passions you used to have, playing the golf, hunting, fishing, theater, whatever it is, going to art movies, riding your bike. I default to that. Recover that and go, and say that's who I am. I've been lost, because your brain wants to remember, right? Disconnect. For several hours a day, right? Just turn it off. Don't answer. Your scrolls, your texts, your notifications, and kind of leave a trail. I heard this said once. It's like, a friend of mine was deployed like 3 times in the Gulf during the war, and the first one, he said, he's there, he's a young guy, probably a PFC, and they're in the place that they're going to be in, the barracks or the living quarters. And he asked the sergeant first class, or gunny if he was a Marine, man, look, there's all this shit written on the walls, like, William Horton, whatever, 2008 to 2009, I was here, and people write stuff like that, right? And so the guy asked the sergeant, like, why, what is this? What is that? And he goes, you never want to forget where you're at. And he goes, look at that wall. A lot of the people, but it's like, write down, I was here and I remember the things that really happened from my viewpoint, because the powers that be may try to get you to rewrite your memories, right? And again, it sounds bad, but default to the Nuremberg trials, where all the guys were like, I didn't give these orders. You're the colonel running a gulag. That's Russian. A camp. You pretty much gave the orders, and to see it, and this is political, but I love saying it. It's like a few years ago when we were at the height of the war we were in, there was Abu Ghraib, where we were doing not so nice things to the prisoners of war. But the first thing I noticed, and a friend of mine pointed out, the highest rank that got in trouble was a sergeant. Where are the colonels? Where's the generals? Where's the CIA operatives? Well, they went to the people with no power and blamed them. And they're the ones that got in trouble. And at that level, they really are deferring somewhat to authority. And the one guy said, well, the reason I did it, the guy before me, they court-martialed because he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't follow an order, right? So anyway, so you lose a little bit of who you are. I just wanted to put that out there real quick. Have some fun with it. I'm working on getting this done as a nice slide or something. Hint, David. And we'll have some fun with it. And I got to run, but I just wanted to do that. So talk to you all soon.